But what do you mean that was 80 years ago, it's time to move on? I got this comment on my last video about the current tensions between China and Japan after I said that China is very vigilant about any hint of Japan returning back to militarism, especially after the recent comments by the new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi about possible military intervention in the Taiwan Strait. And I've seen these type of comments basically leave the past in the past quite a bit recently, especially around the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. But here's the thing, China brings up this history not because it's trapped by it, but because Japan's handling of that history today does not match the scale and severity of what actually happened. The forced labor, the destruction of entire cities, the mass killings, the biological warfare, the systematic sexual violence, 35 million casualties in China over 14 years. That's not something you move on from, especially when the conditions for genuine reconciliation are not in place. Japan has flip-flopped about its official stance depending on which prime minister is in office. And for very many years now, the general direction in Japan has been to either minimize its wartime responsibility or deny crucial aspects of it. In 1995, Japanese Prime Minister Tomichi Murayama issued a statement on the 50th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, which is now considered Japan's most direct apology. However, that was undermined and softened by statements from prime ministers who came after him, including Shinzo Abe, who in 2015 basically gave a watered-down apology. He said, "Previous cabinets have apologized, so I'm going to keep mum, and whoever comes after me should not be predestined to apologize." End of story. Since 2012, no Japanese prime minister has used the word remorse in their speeches until this year by former Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba, who still failed to mention his country's wartime aggressions or any of the suffering that it caused across Asia. And honestly, it's really hard for China to take any apology as sincere when words are not being backed by actions, especially with the repeated visits by Japanese officials to the Yasukuni Shrine, which honors convicted war criminals, without really caring how this looks a lot like glorifying the very ideology that once devastated half of Asia. And then there's the history education in Japan, with controversies surrounding textbooks which now have either incomplete or inaccurate information about the historical events from that period. For example, calling the Nanjing massacre Nanjing incident, even though it is a well-documented, brutal 6-week campaign by the Japanese army in the Chinese city of Nanjing that killed 300,000 people, a number that Japan claims is hard to determine or that is currently being researched. And so China sees this as the slow erasing of memory, especially that in Japan, the younger generations now know less and less about the war as time moves on. I mean, already 1 in 4 people in Japan do not know when the Second World War ended, and only 42% think that Japan's military campaign in the Pacific was a war of aggression, which is less than the percentage of people who cannot make up their mind. I'm going to leave you with 3 statements from China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2005, 2015, and 2025. I need you to pause for a second and look at how the message barely changed in 20 years. China has been consistent, and for that message to change, Japan needs to change the way it handles this matter.